All right. Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome to Yomi Week in Lightning Review. Um, can we call this Chazaka Week? Some people say Chazaka, depending on how they accent the word. So lovely to see you all, filling space while people come in the room. And yes, I am Rachel Scheinerman. I edit My Jewish Learning and the Daily Dose of Talmud. And this is your half-hour Daf Yomi Week in Lightning Review, where we look at some things that happened in the Daf this week and get excited for next week. We're always have a rotating cast of wonderful teachers here. And this morning, we're joined by Dr. Sarah Ronis.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Scheinerman. I see some folks already introducing themselves in the chat, whether this is your first time joining us or whether this is your 40th time. Come on in, say hello, tell us where you're joining us from. Good morning from sunny San Antonio, Texas, where I think the high today is a low and breezy 104. So that's going to be fun. Now, this week, we had a really interesting week of some fairly detailed technical discussions. We started out talking about the possible reasons that one might have biased testimony, whether they intend to or not, based on some pre-existing financial relationships, right? Can you testify without bias if you have a pre-existing financial relationship with the person you're testifying about? And we got some really interesting scenarios, right? Your sort of classic financial relationships, creditor and borrower, one who sells a field without a guarantee, whether or not it's actually their field to begin with, and the person who bought that field. My personal favorite financial relationship that they describe is the robber and the victim, which is a financial relationship, right? Absolutely. And really asking who can testify on behalf of who and be trusted that they're not biased. Then we get to this great case, which what if you're in the middle of a financial transaction buying an animal and a third party comes in the middle and says, wait, that animal is mine. I already bought it. Then we shifted to talk about craftspeople and launderers, right? Anyone here who's ever dropped something off at a dry cleaner, this might have resonated for you. Can we assume that something in the domain of a craftsperson or a launderer is theirs? Right? If you walk into the dry cleaners and there's that whole rack of clothing behind them, and they say to you, "Oh yeah, but that dress is mine." Do we presume, right? That's that language of chazaka. And I appreciate, Dr. Scheidemann, that you pointed out it's pronounced a bunch of ways. My habit is to say chazaka. Can we assume that it's actually theirs, or is it more likely that it's a client's that they're waiting for pickup? When do we trust them to say that it's theirs? And we get a couple of different answers. Maybe only in the case of Amigo, right? M-I-G-G-O, I see a transcript being generated, which is when you make a claim that is not as advantageous as a claim could be if you were going to lie to get all the things, right? If you were going to make up a lie to get stuff, you'd make it as good as possible for yourself. What if you are making a claim that isn't actually as good for you as you think it would be? Or maybe, so the Talmud says, maybe actually we never let a craftsperson or a launderer presume ownership because the stuff in their store just we don't ever presume is theirs. Then we get to, and I'm sure this has happened to some of us as well, what if a craftsman or a launderer returns the wrong object to someone? You go to pick up your suit, you pick up your suit, you thought it was a fabulous navy suit, and you open it up and it's apparently actually a dark gray suit that is not the one that was yours. What do you do before you unswap? And what if it's possible that the dry cleaner did that on purpose because they're actually a little bit shady? Then we talked about, right, so I mean, there's a lot of really interesting stuff here. And this week, one of the things that I found most interesting, but also a little bit frustrating, was that we got a lot of really good questions. We didn't actually get very many answers. We got a lot of questions about ways to think about the rabbinic the sort of business financial relationships that we have with the people in our lives, from our landlords to our to the people who do our dry cleaning. Um, Lots of different questions to help us think about those relationships, very few answers as to how to actually define the parameters of those relationships. Um, and that continues on, because the next relationship that the Talmud really thinks about is the relationship between parents and children. Can the children of craftsmen and sharecroppers and robbers establish a chazaka? Can they establish a presumption of ownership? Right? If they say, I got this thing from my parent, who was a craftsman, a sharecropper, or a robber, do we believe that it's actually that it was their parents and now it's theirs? Now, interestingly, here we get a kind of interesting answer. The Talmud tells us that when it comes to craftsmen and craftspeople and sharecroppers, I was telling Dr. Scheinman I hadn't had quite enough coffee this morning. You can hear that in my language. We can absolutely trust, right? The children of craftsmen and sharecroppers can establish a chazaka, but robbers no, because their fathers work through physical intimidation, right? People who are robbers, right? And we're talking here aggressive stealing of things, probably are pretty scary people. And as long as they're alive, their kid might lie out of fear of physical retaliation. But the Talmud says, but maybe the grandchildren of robbers can be trusted, because presumably their grandparents are at the very least in a physically weakened state due to age, and maybe a little bit less physically intimidating. Then speaking about physical intimidation, then we shifted to talk about physical coercion for a sale. Can you be physically coerced into selling something? Well, I mean, the answer to that is obviously yes. Is that sale valid? Is the question, right? Is it a legally valid sale? And that shifts us to then think about, can you physically coerce giving a get, a Jewish bill of divorce? And the rabbi's answer is yes, you can physically coerce a sale. No, you cannot physically coerce a get. So, right, we're shifting here in our thinking about relationships. We went from financial relationships, we went to father-child relationships, and now we've shifted to marital relationships. And that gets the Talmud this week to a discussion about how financial issues play out in marriages. And that's what I'd like to look at with you in our time together this morning. Now, in order to do that, I have to figure out how to share the link. So I am going to copy a link that I will put in the chat. I am also going to share a screen, don't worry, but I know that some of you like to look at this on your own, or you can follow along. But if you want to not follow along on your screen and just look on mine, that's also completely fine. So what I wanted to look at with you this week is a piece. It's actually quite near the end of our week of Talmud. And here we have this question about, can you waive future rights, right? Can you say, I don't have a thing now, but at some point I'm going to get this thing and I don't want it and I'm waiving my rights to it now. So Rav Kahana says, with regard to an inheritance that comes to a person from another place, right? So it hasn't gotten to you yet, right? Let's remember, these are the days before bank transfers. And so we have somebody here who is, who hears, God forbid, somebody has passed away and left them an inheritance from really far away. And it's probably going to take some months to get whatever this thing is to them. A person can make a condition about it that he will not inherit it, right? You can waive your future rights to that thing and say, it's not mine. I don't want it. I'm not taking it. I have no ownership stake in it. Why is that possible? In accordance with the opinion of Rava, As Rava said, anyone who says, I do not want to avail myself of an ordinance of the sages, such as this one, we listen to him. Right. If the rabbis give you something that is to your benefit, so not something according to Torah law, but something according to rabbinic law, you can say, I choose not to benefit from whatever thing this is. I can waive that right. So I'm curious, what are our impressions of the text so far? We many of us read this in our preparation of the daf. So I'd love to, if anyone has any impressions, or as you were reading this, if you had any thoughts you want to drop in the chat or raise your hand, I'm sure we can find you through the magic of technology. Any thoughts about waiving your future inheritance rights? I mean, I guess one question I'd ask while we're thinking about that is, why would anyone waive their future inheritance rights? So, Naomi points out, right, this is a very, those of us, with who live in countries with estate taxes, Naomi Gratz points out, I don't want to pay taxes on it. Absolutely. Robert, this is a statement that I personally sympathize with. I don't want that ugly green rug, right? Whatever thing it is that they're sending me that they want me to have, I don't want it. And not only that, but I might, if they send it to me to deliver, I might have to actually pay upon receipt the delivery people for that ugly green rug I don't want. Lynn, you are much nicer than I am, because you point out I want someone who might get it from me to receive it instead, right? Maybe there's somebody else who loves that green rug and would really benefit from it. Michael Wagman, you pointed out that sometimes it's not about the item, it's about how the wealth was acquired, right? You don't want a monetary gift that was acquired in ways that are not in accordance with your values. Absolutely. Betsy, like this one again, right? It says your kids don't want any of your stuff, right? Maybe you find the rug is fine, but you're about to downsize. And what on earth? None of your kids are going to want this. Are going to want this rug. Aaron points out, and I see Brian says the exact same sort of aligning the thing, which is maybe they don't like the person giving it and they don't want any benefits from them, right? And I think that goes back to a point which where is it? It was up here. Carol pointed out, right? Carol noted at the top, might there be pressure to do this, right? That the gifts and rejecting gifts both come with strings. Right, both come with strings, and maybe you don't want to have those strings. And then I also see that Bob points out, and I think this is the social piece of this puzzle, that this might lead to arguments with the deceased's family, that oftentimes moments of inheritance are really fraught because they are moments of death and loss. And so everyone's emotions are heightened, and maybe you don't need this rug and other people desperately need a rug. Maybe you know that that rug is somebody else's favorite and you are fine on the rug, but saying I don't want the rug, I waive my rights to the rug, could avoid some of those heightened, fraught responsibility. And then I also see Naomi points out that whatever you accept, you then have responsibility for its upkeep, right? Okay, fine if it's a rug, but what if it's a donkey? Right? I mean, I don't have room for a donkey in my suburban backyard. I don't know about you, right? So all kinds of reasons, that really reasonable reasons why somebody would waive their rights to a future inheritance, right? To an inheritance that is coming from afar. And Rava says, look, we, the rabbis, gave you permission, right? We said you can receive an inheritance from afar because we wanted to financially benefit you. You can waive your rights to it. Rava says, I'm not sure why you would, but you could. And I think we pointed out there are lots of reasons, and I'm sure actually Rava knows this as well. There are lots of reasons why one might choose to waive those rights. Now, in Rava's statement, he says, anyone who says, I do not want to avail myself of an ordinance of the sages such as this one, we listen to him. So the Talmud's next question is, well, all right, we quoted Rava saying something, referencing something. What is he referencing? Right? That's the next question that the Talmud's going to ask. What is the such as this one that Rava is referencing when we quote him? Right? Because let's remember, the Talmud quotes rabbis from all the time in one conversation where the quote is from a different conversation. So the question is, what's the original such as this one? What is such as this? Rava is referring to that which Rav Huna says that Rav says. As Rav Huna says that Rav says, a woman can say to her husband, I will not be sustained and I will not work. Okay, so here we've shifted back. And remember, as much as this week was about these sort of very complex, tricky financial relationships, it's also about the nature of relationships. Business relationships, criminal relationships, child relationships, spousal relationships. And a woman can say to her husband, right? So here in the traditional rabbinic ketubah, a man promises his wife three things: food, clothing, and the benefits of intimate marital life. And a woman can say here, I will not be sustained. This is specific to the food piece. A woman can say, I'm not going to take food from you, and I will not work. All right, so let's unpack that just a little, especially because one of the great things about Daf Yomi is that you can jump in at any point because the cycle is a cycle and it returns. So especially for those of us who either weren't doing Daf Yomi when we were learning the laws of Kiddushin, of Jewish marriage and betrothal, or for those of us who were doing it, but let's be honest, it was a while ago and our heads are in the bavas now. A man is obligated to provide his wife with those three things: food, clothing, and intimacy, good intimacy. And a wife cedes a whole bunch of financial, loses some financial rights when she gets married. One of the financial rights that a woman loses is that she does not own any income that she makes during the marriage, according to the rabbis. That's basically the deal. The husband supports her financially, and any income that she makes during the marriage becomes is his. That's not the case for things that she brings into the marriage. That's not the case for anything that they've carved out. But if, she has a job that has a weekly salary, that weekly salary halachically belongs to her husband according to these laws. And here, Rav Huna says that Rav says, a woman can say to her husband, I'm not actually going to take food from you, right? You still owe me clothing and you still owe me intimacy, but I'm not taking any of your food and I'm keeping my salary, right? My salary is mine. She can say that, and that works. And what's interesting is the rabbi, right, Rava, right, if we connect that to what Rava said, it sounds like the rabbis instituted this for her benefit, right? For her benefit, that she gets all of this support from her husband and all she has to do is give up her income. But you can choose to waive that right. So let's ask the same question we asked before. Why would a woman say, I will not be sustained and I will not work? Right? I will not take food from you, but I'm keeping my salary. I'm not working for you, I'm working for me. Any ideas? Why would you do that? Okay, so Eleanor suggests that this might be that this is in some ways about status, right? She keeps her own independence. She has her own bank account. She has her own independent economic existence in the world. Now, Betsy and Lynn point out maybe she makes bank, right? Maybe she actually um, makes a lot more than he makes. And why would she cede that to him? And yes, just so folks know, because I'm seeing this in the comments, the will not work here refers or seems to be referring to her labor belonging to him. And that can be her labor in the household. It also can be her labor outside of the household. Yeah. So it would include both of those things. Now, Naomi suggests maybe she wants to force a divorce. Maybe she's married and she's unhappily so and doesn't want to be married. Yoram notes this is not a full symmetry. The husband gets to provide three, or has to provide three, and she gives up only one of them. Absolutely. Right. Now, the other two that she gets, right? I mean, to some extent, the question is, what does it actually mean to be married? And is being economically entangled part of being married? Rob points out she could be sustained by someone else. Maybe she had a previous marriage with an inheritance that was attached, or children who are sustaining her, and she just doesn't need the money. Lynn suggests maybe he's not good at keeping accounts and she's better at it. And her being in charge of the books means their finances will be more orderly, right? Or maybe he has a gambling problem, so she doesn't want to risk their financial security by ceding control to him, right? There was this huge wave of women in the 1940s and 50s and 60s who worked as bookkeepers. It was one of the sort of early things that women had access to in the labor force in the United States in the post-war period, or at least some women had access to. And so if you are a bookkeeper, that, this might be your thing. Absolutely. Now, what's interesting, and I'm seeing this sort of point out, is the way that the Talmud frames this, the fact that a woman's earnings and labor belong to her husband, but in exchange she gets sustenance, is to her benefit. But she does have the right to reject it. Now, I want to note, we're not necessarily talking about a case where a marriage is unhappy. And I think a lot of you noted all kinds of reasons in the chat why somebody might be very happily married and still want their earnings to belong to themselves. But what I wanted to highlight, because this is what struck me, this is one of those things where I went down a rabbit hole, is within Orthodox halacha, a woman's earnings today still belong to her husband. That actually, from a halachic standpoint, as understood by Orthodox communities, what a woman earns in her marriage still belongs to her husband. And Lynn, you used the F word in the chat, right? The F word here being feminist, right? And suggests maybe the man is an early feminist and wants her to have agency. Well, and I'll note too that in the Talmud, it's not that the man says it, it's that the woman says, I'm deciding the terms. Maybe the woman is an early feminist. That the idea that a woman's income today in 2024 belongs to her husband is troubling to a lot of folks. So Claudette, I'm going to invite you to share a thought, and then I'm going to share a thought. Go for it. Can we unmute Claudette?
Yeah, I have a question. You say in the Orthodox community that a woman's earning belongs to her husband. Should those couples separate, which law would be, should we be the law of the land that she's living in, where it says half and half goes, or is the Orthodox law the one that has to go work with?
That is a wonderful question. So just so we know, just so we can be clear, the Talmud here is talking about a couple when they are married. At the moment when the marriage ceases, then all of her income going forward would belong to her. Right, or if whether it's a divorce or she is widowed after she doesn't have a husband, the material that it belongs to her. Now, what do you do in that period of separation before a divorce? That is actually a really you may not know how much of a can of worms you just opened, and that depends on all kinds of different things that I can't go into in our next 4 minutes. But what I will say is, and this actually connects really beautifully to a discussion that we read this week. And if you read the Yomi piece that I think I wrote on the collusion between the Beit Din, right, the Jewish court, and the non-Jewish court in forcing a get through physical coercion, back in the day and today, the answer to that question depends on the kinds of relationships between religious courts and state courts in a particular state. Right, so going back to our theme for today, relationships really matter here. And here I mean the relationships between different judicial systems. It's really complicated.
Thank you.
Now, yeah, it's a big can of worms. But one of the things that I want to highlight, and I think, Claudette, your question also brings this to mind, is we may be asking a series of questions about that statement based on our own experiences and our own modern perceptions over the last 50 or 60 years that have actually led to some really interesting innovations, within the more orthodox space. So I just wanted to share with you, because I think sometimes it's interesting to think about how this plays out for modern communities who read these texts as binding in some way, that there are a series of contracts, right? So we may know about prenups, right? Legal prenups in the non-Jewish world. We may know about certain kinds of prenups in the Jewish world around issues of divorce specifically. There is also a kind of prenup within the Orthodox world, which is about exactly this, which is about who owns what who owes what finances and income. And so there are a number of different texts of prenups, whether they're written or whether they're stated under the chuppah, where men essentially concede any right to their spouse's future earnings. And say, we are entering into this marriage, and it's not about divorce. It's about right now in the marriage, your earnings are your earnings, your work is your work, and my work is my work. Now, I want to note, because Naomi, I think this is a wonderful question. When I say Orthodox, I actually mean modern Orthodox and mainstream Orthodox as well. The prenups are more common in what we might call of today modern Orthodox communities in Israel and America. They are less common in the Haredi world, though I haven't done a systematic survey. But I want to just note that what we're seeing here, and this is sort of where I'd like to leave us on this Thursday morning, is how communities who see these texts as not just inspiring or interesting to think about, but as setting the terms of their lives, continue to develop ways to think with these texts, to think about these texts, and to think with the world as we continue to have all kinds of really complicated relationships with each other, inspired by our tradition and by our own experiences. And I will wish you all a wonderful week in the DAF, and see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Dr. Ronis. And thank you, Lynn, for the little ad that we have a class at My Jewish Learning in half an hour on the Haftarah with Rabbi Lauren Tuckman. If you go straight to myjewishlearning.com/ I think it's either hub or the hub, You can find all our classes there if you are curious to check that one out. So that's a fun little advertisement at the end of our class. But as always, we will see you in your inbox tomorrow morning and in this space in exactly 1 week's time. Thank you, everybody, and Shabbat Shalom.